Okay, so there was a question regarding AnyLogic support for hierarchical states. So AnyLogic does allow you to have hierarchical states, okay? And one thing you could do, for example, would be to have an entry point for the whole state. This might be, infection state chart, right? And then you might have a more global state that's associated with being living. So living state, something like that. Or we might just call it living to avoid being sort of redundant about it, because it's clearly a state by virtue of being in a state chart. So you might have a living category. And after some amount of time of living, they might over time they have some chance of death. Okay, so we might have a transition out called death, right? And this transition goes to some final state, for example. Okay. Now notice when we connect this final state, Wei Bin encountered this earlier. It doesn't connect so easily. We have to be sure to sort of drag it so that it's a proper connection. But Kurt's question had to do with the nature of the hierarchical states. So we could have within this, for example, a further state chart that distinguishes people by categories. Susceptible, for example, individuals, infected individuals, and we might have recovered individuals. This is just one way of doing it. Another way to do it is with two separate state charts, recovered. But I'm trying to answer Kurt's question. And we could have transitions between them. Don't feel like you have to do it this way. I'm just showing how you can use hierarchical state charts. And then we could have,
yeah. You want to access whether susceptible state is active or not.
Yes. That's a good question. I'll get to that in just a minute, okay? So, ladies and gentlemen, here we have a susceptible, infective, recovered. But as Kurt noted, there was, we might limit this error messages to just this area selected. Right now, there's actually, there's no problem specifically selected. Oh, excuse me, here we are. It says, you notice it says element is not reachable. So I think this was the error Kurt was encountering. So we might have an initial state pointer that says when we enter this bigger state, you want to go to this susceptible state first. Okay, and this will allow it, when you come into living, to go into these states. One advantage of this versus having death transitions from each of these states is that all of these states, you're subject to this mortality. So maybe you have some, I'm not saying you have this in this particular example, we're doing a class, but maybe you have some chance of 1% per year of dying, right? And so there's 1% per year per dying. And maybe whatever state you're in, you have that chance of dying in general from natural causes. Maybe you have a further chance when you're infected, for example, of dying from the infection. I didn't mean to drag that around. So maybe there's a further chance of dying from the infection. I just double-clicked on this to create a bend in it, and there we go. So maybe this is an aspect of death from infection, so mortality from the infection. Okay, so this is infection mortality or something like that, infection mortality. And this is general mortality, natural mortality. So Kurt, does that answer your question though? The fact that, so this is natural mortality, something like that. But Kurt, you do need this initial state pointer in order to sort of indicate when you come into this big state, where do I go? Where do I go? What other state do I go to? You go to this state here. That's what this initial state pointer from over here is saying. Does that make sense? Oh, I was just showing that if you have a final state, you might have several transitions to it. In fact, you could have transitions from different state charts, although I don't show that here.
The way that you have it there, you wouldn't have to. Because that single transition from a big state will pull them out of whatever state it is.
Yes, but these are two different processes. This is natural mortality, and this is infection-related mortality, which might occur at a higher rate. So this might be, maybe it doubles your chance of mortality while you're infected or something like that. Okay, so that was just a bit on